You are listening to the Overthinker's Guide to Joy, episode 71. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing two writers who have inspired me through their books and blogs for years, and I am so excited to be able to share the conversation with you all today. Let's dive in. This is a podcast for overthinkers, overdoers, and overachievers who are tired of feeling overanxious and just want to feel better. I'm your host, certified life coach, Jackie DeCrenis. Hi. So today I have a very special guest, not guest, but guests, plural. And that is a wonderful couple who I am delighted to have on today's podcast. I am introducing Marc and Angel Chernoff, who are the best-selling authors of Getting Back to Happy, as well as the Good Morning Journal, 1,000+ little things happy, successful people do differently, and 1,000+ little habits of happy, successful relationships. Through their blog, Marc and Angel Hack Life, as well as their professional coaching, podcast, live events, and courses, they have spent the past decade writing about and teaching proven strategies for finding lasting happiness, success, love, and peace. I happen to own all of their books, and they proudly sit on my nightstand, so I am a fan of them, and I have taken their courses, and I am just so delighted to have them here on the podcast today to talk all about things in life. And with that, I welcome Marc and Angel.
Hi, Jackie. Thank you so much for having us.
Yep, we're excited to be here and spend some time with you and your community.
Thank you. Thank you. So I just ordered, it came out, I think, 2 weeks ago, the new book. So The Good Morning Journal is such a beautiful new book. I love all your books. I love the way you write. I love the way you present complex information in really digestible little micro bites. And I love the practice of when I read your books, whether I read them, and I've done it both. I've sat down and read them cover to cover over a weekend. And then I've also left them on my nightstand, as I said in the intro, and I read a page a night, which is so powerful because what you offer are little, very basic, but incredibly important reminders of, as your blog post is called, how to hack life. I mean, it really is little tiny micro habits that make a difference. And this journal is incredible. So tell the audience a little bit about the origin of how you guys began as both writers and coaches and bloggers, and even as a couple. Start in the middle, start at the beginning, start with yesterday.
I guess I could take the first stab at it. So our entire body of work related to Marc and Angel Hack Life and personal development was born out of necessity. So back in the 2008 timeframe, which is quite a while ago now, we sadly went through the darkest period of our lives up to that point. We were in our late 20s at the time, and we lost two loved ones back to back. Angel's dear brother, Todd, and a mutual best friend, Josh. We were desperately struggling to cope with grief. At that point, had never experienced grief at that level. We had lost grandparents, but not somebody, our age, that was happening out of order. This was also the downturn of the economy. So we were struggling with grief, and then we were struggling with job loss, and we were struggling financially and trying to figure out and navigate the loss of a job on Angel's end, she was the breadwinner at the time. So it was a family breadwinning job loss. So juggling these experiences all together led us on this path, which was trying to figure out how to properly grieve, how to properly cope with adversity. We found that the first thing we wanted to do by default was run from it. And it wasn't a conscious choice. It was a subconscious thing, but we were certainly turning to distraction, right? Distracting ourselves with television, distracting ourselves with alcohol, just sort of generally running away from the conversations that even us as a newly married couple at that time, we'd been married a couple of years, we could have easily been supporting each other. Instead, we were sort of turning against each other in that dark time. So our body of work was born very much as a public accountability journal, right? So we both saw some counselors individually. And one of the kind of recommendations that was universal between those counselors was you need to start taking steps to undo some of these rituals and habits that you've built in your life that are having you avoid some of the grief and pain and struggle and start moving in the right direction. So we had to undo some of what we were doing, but not just undo it, replace it with something positive. So one of those things was journaling. right? And rather than avoiding what we were feeling, write about what we are feeling. And the first public accountability journal was really our blog, markandangel.com. So we started that blog as a place to put the thoughts, the stories, the emotions, the things that we were going through at the time, to hold ourselves publicly accountable to what, our better judgment told us, but what we forgot in the heat of those emotional moments when we were really feeling low. And that journey of just kind of building that positive ritual into our lives, then of course was the reminder to actually do little things like take a walk together, have a conversation about something that's on our mind that day, right? And leverage the journaling as sort of the prompts for doing that.
So good.
Journaling really was one of the baselines. And one of the reasons that a lot of what we write is in these digestible chunks is because, again, that was the stuff that went right over our head in those really tough moments, right? We knew, hey, like now's the moment to take a deep breath. Now's the moment to lean in and not lean out. But of course, we were doing the opposite. And so the little reminders that go in a book like 1,000 Little Things Happy, Successful People Do Differently, what we were writing at that time in our lives that we knew we needed to remind ourselves of and keep top of mind for those moments we needed it most.
Well, that's why I say it lives on my nightstand, is because it's one of those things. It's impossible to remember 1,000 things when you're in crisis or you're grieving or you're pissed off. Yeah. You're like, okay, I've got 1,000 things I could do. I don't know any of them. Like you freeze. But turning to a page and going, there's one thing you can do right now, and it's one of the things I coach on a lot. I'm like, start with a glass of water. Like, just, are you hydrated? Like really basic stuff. And people say that's so basic, but sometimes it's the basic that hits the reset button. And it's 1 + 1 = 3, actually, because you get benefits of just doing little baby micro steps. So I love that you did that. I love that you created a public accountability journal for yourselves by writing the blog. And I love that that's how you managed your grief as you were also getting counseling and trying to figure out what to do. I want to comment on something you said because it's profound. And I think I don't want to gloss over it, but you talked about the grief of losing a loved one in an improper, you didn't say this, but in an improper like timeline, right? So somebody who's young versus a grandparent, which is always sad too. But when people have lived their entire life cycle of 85 or 95, that's sort of a blessing to have had a whole life. And when somebody dies young, that is unexpected. And we're not really prepared for that. And you had it twice in your house by having it at the same time almost. But you also talked about grief of an economic downturn and grief of a loss of job. And I think there's a lot of people going through that again, because our economy is shifting yet again. And there's been a lot of job losses lately. And so people discount grief as grief is only when somebody dies, but grief is also heartbreak, loss of a job, loss of a best friend. Like grief comes in many forms. And so I love what you said, which is we were grieving in many ways. And this is how we managed our grief.
Yeah, absolutely. Grief looks different, right? And the level of grief from one person to another is different too. And so acknowledging that what we may be going through is grieving, right? Grieving what was, grieving the unknown. Yeah, it can look very different.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, I think what you said, you just hit the nail on the head, is that, what puts one person into depression, as an example, will not put the next person into depression, even though they've experienced the same thing. In fact, Josh's widow, Tammy, who now works with us, she's been to all of our Think Better, Live Better events. She's part-time, but like we've done so much work together over the years. She handled that situation miraculously well, right? Mm-hmm. Comparatively to others in our lives who handled both Josh's passing and Angel's brother Todd's passing indifferently, right? So it just depends. I mean, Cammie was devastated, of course, grieving for a long time. But she was not depressed. She actually, she was driven to live for her boys, to figure out what the next step is, to use Josh's his memory as kind of an honorable way to figure out what the next step was. So yeah, but acknowledging that it hits us all differently. And like you said, Jackie, that even if it's not something as seemingly devastating as the loss of someone you love, but maybe the loss of a job you relied on, or a situation in your life that you didn't expect to change, right? The way you feel about that is important to tune into, and also reflect on, right? Because we want to we don't want to overwhelm ourselves with the pain that we feel, but we need to address it. There needs to be a way to have the boundary to say, this can't be ignored. It needs to be addressed,
Right.
but I need to have the right boundaries in place so that I can do this in a healthy way.
Right. Well, and such a tightrope walk when you have a feeling, whether that's grief or sadness or sorrow or heartbreak, and you do need to acknowledge it and process it. You don't want to like bury it under a rock, ignore it, stuff it down, because that's what creates illness or dis-ease, right? I think Louise Hay said that. But acknowledging your grief or sorrow or loss, and then finding a more productive thought, one that can bring comfort or solace. And again, not exchanging your grief, like feel your feelings, have your thoughts, but developing a skill to reframe them or take an action like in the journaling to process them so that they don't fester and become infectious.
Absolutely.
So I think that's just really powerful. But I just wanted to acknowledge that because it is something I see in my own practice where I have people who are grieving from like loss of a loved one, loss of a divorce, a breakup, something. It's usually loss of control, right? Isn't that kind of what the essence of it all is? But because I coach a lot of people in Hollywood, there's a lot of job loss right now. So I have a lot of clients who are going through job loss due to either the WGA strike or the layoffs of the major corporations. And they are feeling grief, different than losing a loved one. But it is, how will I pay my bills? How will I pay my mortgage? How will I support my family? Will I ever work again? All of these unknowns. And again, to your point, it is a feeling of loss of control.
Yeah. Most definitely.
Yeah. A feeling of also uncertainty, right? Like you said, like, what does this look like going forward? How do I pay my bills? How do I do this? So loss of control and loss of uncertainty.
Yeah. Well, and that feeling of uncertainty too feels very scary, right? Like the human mind interprets, in the human body, really both, right? Mind and body interpret that feeling of uncertainty the same way that it interprets the feeling of fear, right? But those two things are actually very different, right? Uncertainty is, hey, something's changing here. I don't know what the road ahead, has in store for me. It could be good. It could be bad. I can navigate this. I can figure it out. But fear is, there's a fire burning down that road and I better not go down it. Right. But when we feel uncertain, we almost feel like that fire is burning. Right. That's the way our body responds. Like, ooh, something's different. I can't even take another step forward because I might get burned. But that's not reality. The reality is I need to take some steps here, but like they might not be perfect steps. It might be a little bit difficult, but there's also opportunity down that road and I need to navigate down it to find it. So, yeah, I think that's a big part of that self-reflection process. That's the big part, leaning into it down the road and not out so that you're stuck in one place, not being able to make progress again.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think that that's probably the difference between the human brain and the animal brain, which is like, there's reptilian, right? So that fight or flight where you're just always, am I going to be eaten today? There's that. And then the mammalian brain has a little bit more reasoning. And then the prefrontal cortex is the one that's like, wait, there's opportunity, because that's the one who like actually can process information and say, wait, this sucks, but I think that there could be great opportunity in this. But you kind of have to go through the thought in all three forms of all three parts of the brain before you get to the part where you go, wait a minute, I think this could be a good thing in the long run. It does not feel good right now, but maybe there's something to give. In your case, your loss turned into a beautiful blog over a decade that helped hundreds of thousands of people find comfort in society, and then a series of New York Times bestselling books. So, I mean, there was a lot of beauty that came out of that. And it doesn't mitigate the loss, but it does convert the feeling from, as you said, depression to something productive, something helpful. It's kind of amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, and that goes back to that progress, right? That like when you're in a very dark space or you're just feeling a bit stuck, right? It doesn't have to be a very dark space. It can be just feeling like, hey, I'm spinning my tires here and I don't know how to get going again. I don't know which road to take. It's important to start doing micro steps and tracking the progress you're making, right? Because for us, like at that dark period in our lives, like everything was stagnant, like everything stopped, right? We were grieving, we were trying to figure things out and we were running away, and running away was running in place. We were doing the same things that weren't serving us, that weren't helping us grow. And we were becoming depressed on that because we were making no progress. Mm-hmm. So building in the positive habits, and rituals like journaling, like having some conversations, like building a small community of other people who are also grieving, who could share stories with each other. Like there was noticeable progress in those small steps. And when we saw that progress, we felt a little bit better. To your point, Jackie, it didn't erase things, but that progress felt good. And it showed us that the next step was possible, right? And so again, like progress is that hidden key to happiness, especially when you're struggling, especially when you feel stuck. You got to figure out a way, how can I build a little bit of progress in? And how can I track it so that I can reflect on it, notice it, and see myself moving forward again?
Yeah. That's probably the biggest mistake people make is when they're stuck in something, they want to go to the end result. Like, for example, somebody is, sprained their ankle or broken their leg. And they're like, but I want to run a marathon. And they can't because they have a sprained ankle or broken leg. And so rather than rehabbing and starting with a walk around the block and going, hey, today I walked around the block because last week I couldn't get out of bed. Mm-hmm. Like that's progress. But they're like, well, I can't run 26 miles. So what's the point? And it's like, whoa. Walk around the block. Like just start there, and make a note of it.
Yeah. Well, and even right in line with that analogy, you can't expedite that healing process either, right? When you break a bone, you can't all of a sudden say, okay, let's speed this up, right? You've got to be patient. You've got to go through the journey, right? Of like, okay, let this heal. And then I can start taking those walks around the block and then growing and getting back up to the idea of running the marathon, right? But we can't expedite the healing process.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Everything in our lives, right? We can't write the book unless we're doing it one sentence at a time, right? We can't get to the top of the mountain unless we take it one step at a time. And these are all cliches to say it, but there's so much truth in them. It's like our mind likes to expedite it. We want to be like 4 steps ahead of where we are, sometimes 20 steps ahead of where we are, but we have to slow down. We have to say, hey, I'm going to take the step that I can take now. Mm-hmm. And that's what matters, right? If I keep on doing that, I'm going to get closer to where I need to be.
Yeah. Our mind not only likes to expedite it, our mind likes to give up when they don't have the end result.
Oh, sure.
So we've all seen that cartoon where the guy is like digging out of a cave and he's like one shovel scoop away from breaking through. And he gives up, but he's been like digging for miles. And it's like, yeah, you got to take one more scoop, one more step. Yeah. So good. So now that was the impetus for the blog. Talk to me about the next step. So the loss, the grief, the blogging, the public accountability for journaling. Tell me the next step that you took in your careers.
Well, I think that was embracing the journey we were on. What'd you say?
Yeah. And so we started being consistent, right? With holding ourselves accountable, writing articles. People started reaching out to us saying, hey, I resonate with this. Tell me more. Or where can I get these articles offline, right? And so we continued to be consistent, right? All of a sudden we're like, oh, wow, right? People resonate with this. They're in a similar situation. Like we can help others while helping ourselves. And so we were consistent with, putting content out there. And then people were asking us, how can I read this information offline? And so we created an ebook, right, with some of our most popular articles. And so we self-published a book first. And so that was actually 1,000 Little Things Happy, Successful People Do Differently, was a self-published book that we did back in 2012, yeah. Right? And that was just based off of a demand, right? People were reaching out to us saying, hey, I'd love your content offline. So we listened. We're like, okay, let's make an ebook. And so that was a PDF.
Yeah. And then we took it and people said, hey, I'd love to listen to audio. So we recorded ourselves. We recorded our own audiobook. And then it was, oh, wow, I'd like this in paperback form. So at the time, Amazon had Create Space. Right now they had the different publishing platform, but we just self-published through that. I mean, we just started taking it one step at a time, right? So, I mean, you're going back to 2008 when this was all sort of seeded. By 2012, we're talking about 4 years later, we're feeling a little bit more confident with the idea that we really can help people, right? At this point, we've seen results online to say, hey, we don't have all the answers and we're not going to pretend to be the end all be all, but we have a story. We understand other people's stories. They're resonating with what we're sharing and it's helping them along while it helps us along. We can lean into this more. So we just sort of took ownership a little bit more of that, I'd say, over the course of that 4 years, putting that, 1,000 little things into the world and starting to branch out a little bit and do some other things. And that, eventually caught the attention of like the big publishing houses like Penguin, who reached out to us over the years. And eventually we didn't even sign until 2017. So another 5 years down the road, we finally penned a deal with them. And all of our books have been released through them since then. But I think, the big part of our journey at that point, as it relates to the blog and writing, was just that imposter syndrome, right? Like, who are we to be giving advice to others? We ourselves have experienced very difficult times and we're struggling for a long time. And when we challenged that imposter syndrome and leaned into it again, instead of away from it, realizing the pain we felt, the grief we were experiencing, some of the depression we still had, all of that actually put us in a better position, not a worse position, to help others, right? We understood the journeys others had been through. In many ways, we're walking down the same path with them. And our willingness to share and kind of create a little bit of an online community for people to share their story. And people, by the way, the blog became a place where we would share other people's stories. We changed the names, we changed the circumstances, but people would tell us their stories and we would just put that back out there in our own words, right? With permission. That was helping more, right? That was helping hundreds and thousands in some cases, more people. So, it was really the transition, like from 2008 to 2012 was this big transition of just taking ownership and really saying, okay, this isn't something that we're just doing for us. In fact, we're doing it for others also. And helping others feels great.
Yeah. The imposter syndrome is something that comes up probably in every session I have with a client. And by the way, people at the top of their game, like executive producers who have produced like a dozen television series. Like, I have imposter syndrome. I'm like, have you seen your credits? Like, are you kidding me? And they're like, yeah, but what if I have no more ideas? What if I'm done? And they hired me to write this show that I've never written. And it is amazing how often that feeling comes up, no matter what your resume, no matter what your bio says. And I think my attitude about imposter syndrome is this: unless you're doing brain surgery or dentistry or, prescribing medications, there is no imposter syndrome when it talks about your own personal journey helping other people. Because all you're saying is, this is my experience. Hope it helps, right? So there's nothing to be an imposter about. Like, you're not going to get it wrong. It's your story.
And I actually have to remind myself of that when we do like keynote talks or when we host our own event, Think Better, Live Better. I will get nervous, of course, right? You're about to go on stage in front of hundreds of people. And I have to remind myself, like, you can't say the wrong thing, right? This is your story. This is your interpretation. And like, those words come out of my mouth before I step out on stage, right? Because I'm in my own head saying, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this all wrong. But you're right. There is no wrong when it comes to your own story.
And that's exactly how we leaned in, right? The imposter was getting in our head. You don't know enough to give advice. And it was like, no, we're not giving advice. We're telling a story here, right? We're telling our story. We're letting you know about what we have done to step through the pain that we've been through in the way that we experienced it, right?
Right.
There's no wrong, to Angel's point. There's no wrong there. This is all right. It's just about sharing. And when someone else shares their story and gives you permission to share their story, there's no wrong there either. This is how they experienced it. And so, leaning into that really helped us overcome that imposter syndrome. And I think, though, to your point, the more elevated you become in the thing that you do, the more you brush shoulders with people who are doing it better than you or different than you. And you start comparing yourself to them. And so in many ways, the more successful you become, I think the more you actually feel that. Because Angel and I experienced that over the years, like over the decade and a half that we've been doing this, is that we've gotten to points like when we hit the New York Times bestseller list in 2018. I can't tell you. We were only on the New York Times list with Getting Back to Happy for a couple of weeks. And it was like, is that enough? Should we have been on it for 10 weeks? It's just an interesting, and why? Because you're looking at other people maybe out there that are in your sphere of, influence that have made it longer. And it sounds completely irrational thinking about this after the fact, but in the heat of the moment, that's what you're thinking, right? That like, I'm not good enough. And it's like, well, wait a second here. It's like,
it's just human nature. And I worked in television for 30 plus years, and every day is that way. Every day, like somebody wins a Golden Globe, somebody wins an Emmy, somebody does this, somebody does that. And they're like, yeah, but I didn't get it for this. It's really a group think, peer pressure-y kind of ridiculousness. And social media, I hate to say it, is like that feeling on steroids, because you scroll through social media and you're like, oh, I've traveled a lot. No, I haven't. Wait, I've never been to Sardinia or Croatia or, whatever it is. And you start to compare and contrast based on curated photos or awards or lists or what have you. And I think it's so important. And it's really in your books, is to like be accountable for what you do best and be grateful for what you've accomplished, right? Like take accounting for what you have done. So again, back to that analogy of the sprained ankle, there's people out there making millions of dollars as professional athletes, hundreds of millions of dollars. And then there's the person who's broken their leg and can't walk around the block, but they need to be excited that when the cast comes off, that they walked around the block. Like you do have to celebrate your wins, whatever big or small there are.
Also giving yourself permission to continue to redefine what success looks like for you.
Well, that's where I was going. So I want to read out of your journal because I happen to be on that page today.
Oh. Look at that.
So this morning, because this journal is intended to be done a page at a day, but I'm a little bit of an overachiever at times. So I tend to do 2 and 3 pages a day. But today's page, you wrote, Marc and Angel wrote, not me. When life feels like an emotional roller coaster, as it does for so many of us right now, just do your best to steady yourself with simple rituals. Make the bed, water the plants, rinse off your own bowl and spoon. Simplicity attracts calmness, peace, and wisdom. And then on the next page, which is probably my favorite question I've gotten to so far in the book, how do you personally define success in life? Yeah. So I wrote my answers. Do you want to go first? How do you personally define success in life?
Yeah. I think at a more micro level as it relates to our work, because I think I have a few different answers for that. And I know Angel probably does too, just depending on the sphere of our life we're talking about, the quadrant of our life, maybe helping others, right? Mm-hmm. So anytime we've gotten lost in our business, right? Lost in the work, questioning ourselves whether we're good enough or not, it comes back to asking ourselves, are we making an impact with others, right? So maybe that product didn't sell as well as we thought. Maybe that book wasn't on the bestseller list for as long as we thought, right? Like all of those little things are helping people. The reason we created those things was to help people. So we go back to that, the impact, like where is at a more micro level, the data that shows what you're doing is helping make a difference in somebody else's life. You're actually elevating them, right? And if we can figure out how to continue doing that, that is being successful. Because we know that the algorithms are going to change, right? There's going to be all these ebbs and flows in how things work. But if there's consistency with making a difference in other people's lives, we're going to ride those waves. We're going to go up and we're going to go down, and we're going to go up, but we're moving forward, So I think at a micro level as it relates to our work, that is it, right? Are we helping people? And if the answer is yes, then we are being successful.
I love that question because I think it's great for all of us to pause and actually ask ourselves, like, what does success look like today, right? Because we get caught up in what we thought success was when we were 18, right? Or
totally.
Someone else thinks success looks like, or what society tells us success looks like. And so I think pausing and asking ourselves, like, what does success look like for me? How do I define it at this time in my life? And actually, referencing that question a couple times a year, right? For me right now, success looks like, loving my life, right? Like making an impact with our work, but also being present as a family, doing activities, just like being present and loving where I'm at. For me right now, like that's what success looks like.
Yeah, that presence is so important because again, if you don't reflect on it, if you're not paying attention, then you don't even notice the progress. You don't notice the experiences, and there's nothing wonderful about missing it,
Yes, 100%. I love that. And I love that what you said, Angel, that what success looked like when we were 18 or what we thought success would be defined as when we were 18 is so different on this side of the hill.
Yeah.
And I do think it changes. I think if you had asked me what success was 10 or 15 years ago, I would have a very different answer than I have today. And I might have a very different answer 10 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do think it's a fluid
Yeah.
I think it's a fluid question. I think there's fluid answers.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had more of a laundry list. I love that you're more concise than I am, but most people are. So my list was this, and I didn't intend it to be a list. I actually intended to answer it into one or two words. And so it started with inner happiness. That was my first answer. And then it went to peace. And then it was feeling genuine gratitude for the big and small things in my life. And then I added being happy with what you have, being present, which is something you said. And then I said, feeling joyful about the little things. When you wake up and are excited to start your day, that is success. And when you feel like you've accomplished something at the end of the day, that is success. So my most successful days are when I bolt out of bed and I'm excited to get to the day, and when I'm exhausted because I've done so much and I lay down at night. Then I know I've had like a successful day.
Yeah, I agree. I love that.
Yeah. Me too.
So I love that question. And thank you for that. So continuing on, we started with the blog, self-publishing, Penguin picking you up, publishing all of your books. The journal came out just a few weeks ago, and now it's available on Amazon and I presume bookstores. I bought mine on Amazon. Where else can they find the journal?
I think it's everywhere books are sold.
Everywhere books are sold.
Yeah.
Your favorite bookstore.
Yeah.
And do you also have a website where you sell your books?
You can go to markandangel.com/book, and we do have them linked off of there, but they're just links to Amazon. Yeah.
Got it.
I mean, one of the beauties of having like Penguin or one of the big publishing houses publish your books is they just kind of put them, you never know where they're going to be. They're definitely at Barnes and Noble. They're definitely on Amazon, but sometimes they're in the airport, they're at all those little bookstores, and it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to find them around here and there.
I would think that would be the greatest compliment of all, is to have them at the bookstores in the airport, because then you're getting everybody. You're getting people internationally and nationally, in big cities and small cities. And that's how you become part of the conversation, right? It's like, I saw it at the airport. We used to joke that whatever article was in United Airlines magazine that week would get pitched as a TV show, like in 2 weeks to our office, because all the people who are flying from either Chicago, LA, New York, LA, Miami, LA, they would be reading the same articles. And they're like, what do you think about an idea? And I'm like, how could 7 people have the same idea? And I'm like, oh, it's on the...
That is funny.
So I think it's awesome that you're also in airports. It's great.
We've got some great compliments off of that kind of exposure. Like just recently, his name is James Shaw. He's at Keller Williams, so a big real estate trainer. So he's a corporate trainer for Keller Williams. He hosts both Keller Williams conferences and his own conferences. And he was downtown Disney in Orlando and found our book, 1,000 Little Things, in like one of those giftable little stores.
Like one of those like quote stores. Like I think it's like Sugar and Co. is the name of the store. Yeah. But yeah, he found our book there and he was flipping through it. And the beauty of that book is you can literally flip to any page and get like a nugget of wisdom and be like, oh, aha, like have that moment. And he's like, I just kept flipping through it and I kept like enjoying what I was reading. And so he bought the book, and then he ended up recommending it to all of his employees at Keller Williams, all of the agents.
Well, even during the journal launch, they bought, I think, 500 copies of the journal just to give to their immediate, executive personnel or whatever. But and he had us out to speak at one of the Keller Williams conferences. So the point is it's like, yes, like the power of putting your message out there and positioning it in the right way, it can benefit other people's lives and it comes back around. Book writing in general, for most of us, is not going to be something that makes you a ton of money, but it can make a ton of impact, and that impact comes back around, right? So I think that that's just an important thing to keep around, in your mind, that success in any one of those industries is about the impact you're making. If you can make an impact, that impact's going to help it spread, right? And in one way or another, which is eventually coming back around to you.
Absolutely. Now, talk about the transition from writing to coaching and or the live events that you did. Not so much the speaking engagements. That's very clear, right? Because when you write a book, often people will invite you to come speak at their business conferences and things like that. But where you're hosting your own seminar or talk to me about how you either started that, or did you start a personal coaching business first? Was it chicken or egg?
Well, I would say the coaching came first, and initially it was more public. It was just sort of like group coaching that was free. It was support group style, right? And so that now we're going back to 08, 09.
Yeah.
So the beginnings of actually talking to people, which back then was through Skype, that was where it began. And from there, we started doing smaller, like, I wouldn't call them a conference per se, but they were more like workshops. Held some workshops, and we just sort of stepped it up from there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a journey, and it's been one that's been both difficult and incredibly rewarding.
Yeah. Much of our work was online, and we were like, how do we get this community in person? Because there's a sense of energy, right? When you're together, when you're in person. And so our first Think Better, Live Better event was in 2016. And so bringing like-minded people together, other speakers, it was incredible, the energy and impact that was able to make for those who were able to attend in person. And so we actually, after that event, we made it an annual thing. And so we've had it 6 years now. We've done it 6 times.
Yeah, we skipped a few because of COVID.
Yeah, but yeah, hosting the live event has been great just to remind ourselves, right? Like, this is not just work online, because sometimes you can feel out of touch when the work is just online, right?
Yes.
Especially if you're just doing the writing and not doing the coaching and not having that FaceTime, you can question whether, is anyone reading this, right? Are we making an impact? And so it can be lonely at times. So having the conference, having the coaching, it reminds you, like, you are able to have an impact. It puts a face to the readers, right? And the stories.
Yes. It seeds the ideas and the stories that you share, right? I mean, I think one of the things about Think Better, Live Better over the years has been that it's not a huge conference. It's about 200 to 300 people, depending on where it is. But the people that show up there are showing up with their story, right? And the people on stage that are giving talks are not any more important than the person sitting next to you who's sharing their story with you. So a lot of the people that we talk to, on the sidebars on the side, or just the main stage talks and workshops, are just great stories that are worth sharing, that are worth diving into and discussing further. So yeah, but it was a long journey. The process of putting all that together. I mean, it started with the coaching, then it went into more small, like, group support stuff. And then it was like, yeah, let's make it more of a live thing, which we did in small scale initially until we stepped up to the Think Better, Live Better conference. And Think Better, Live Better is it's a non-commercial thing. It's definitely just about us inviting the speakers that we invite are there because they're somebody who has inspired us in some way. And honestly, we want to share their story.
Honestly, we created an event that we want to attend.
Yeah, it really is. Selfishly,
I love that.
We sit in the audience when other people are up there talking, and we're like, we are enjoying ourselves. So,
oh, that's amazing. That's like enjoying a restaurant that you built and loving the chefs that you've hired to cook for you. I mean, that's beautiful. I love that. Are you doing one this year?
We just officially decided we're going to delay until February of next year. So we don't know where yet. We're leaning on going back out to San Diego, but we did last just about a year ago now in Orlando, and we were going to do it in October of this year. Historically, we'd always done it in the February timeframe, and we got off cycle because of COVID. And last year, May was the soonest we could do it based on a bunch of conferences we're catching up in the conference space. So then we were like, we didn't like the May timeframe. So we were going to do October of this year, but we've just decided because of the book launch and other things that we have going on, we don't want to rush it. Again, we want this to be an experience that's organic, that we feel great about, that we're ready for. So we're going to push to 2024, February timeframe, probably back out in San Diego.
That sounds wonderful. One of the things I've told you about, outside of this conversation before, is how much I admire not only your writing, which I'm a huge fan, and everything you put out in the world is just, it's positive without toxic positivity. It's simple without being too basic. It's important without being heady. It's just like all the things. But one of the things that I admire so much about you and your business is your commitment to work-life balance, your commitment to each other as a couple and to your son as parents and to your family time, extended family. I love that integrity piece. And, it's something in the coaching business, as you may or may not know. I don't know. I deal with a lot of coaches. I take a lot of seminars. Not everybody has it. There is a lack of integrity amongst some of the bigger names in the business. It's very much about the money pyramid, and you can feel it. And the deeper you're in it, the more you know it. And I love that you guys are always about living your brand and living a life of integrity and simplicity with consistency and authenticity. I just love it all. So I want to thank you for that because it's very inspirational and aspirational.
Well, I appreciate you saying that because we don't know if other people feel that, but that is how we like to show up, right? Like we're doing this work, but we're also, we're constantly a work in progress too, right? And so we do want to live by this and, presence, acceptance, like those are all things that we embrace ourselves.
And not pretending to have all the answers, but just hoping that we can get people asking some of the right questions so that they can find their own way and being there as a supportive presence in their life while they're journeying. But we have experienced that, Jackie. I'll tell you, I won't name any names, but a name that somebody would know. We had decided to do a one-off live event experience that for one reason or another just wasn't going to work out. And we had pulled somebody in. There was a group of us, a couple of us, Angel and I, and one other had seeded the idea and then brought in another party. That other party, when we decided to cancel it, they were really rough around the edges. Let's put it that way. And the reason that they were rough around the edges was all about the money. The expectation was they were going to be making money that was no longer going to be happening because of, on our end, and this other party that we started the idea with decided that now was not the best time for it. So anyway, it was just an interesting experience because it made me think differently about somebody who I've known and only have an online relationship with. But I was like, that's fascinating that their response was definitely seated in anger based on money. But what about the people? What about the other side of this? This is not about money, right? This is just a small live event. Like there's other ways, like other parts of your business. Like why get so upset over something like this? But anyway, we try to constantly, like Angel said, and we appreciate you saying that, live authentically. Give people the refund and the break when they need the break because life happens, right? Like
definitely
treat people the way you want to be treated. Realize that it's not like, am I helping people? Again, like what is the mission here? And when the answer is no, figure it out. But yes, you're going to lose some money here and there. You're going to have some mistakes here and there. You're going to fail forward at times for sure. And all of that is okay.
I love that. I love that. Anyway, I think it's why I was drawn to you as coaches and as writers. And so with that, I just want to remind the audience again how they can get in touch with you, either on your newsletter or obviously they can buy your books and all the places, but just let them know your website again and all the ways that they can learn your wisdom on a weekly basis or daily basis and keep in touch.
Yeah, you can join us on our website, marcandangel.com, and that's Marc, M-A-R-C. We push out 2 to 3 articles a week. You can sign up for our email newsletter and get that. And of course, we have all the social accounts, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can find us on there too.
Yeah, we try to do 3 completely free articles per week that are supported just by the ad revenue that's on the actual blog. So there's no sales pitch or anything on any of those. It's a lot of great content. Again, very story-based. A lot of it based on stories with people we're working with now. So yeah, I think that's probably the best place to start. If you really want to get a feel for our work and you've never heard of us before, just get on the blog, read some of the articles, see what resonates. And if it does resonate, just sign up for the email list. There's plenty of little opt-ins on there, and all you're going to receive are more articles. So
it's great. I love them. I look forward to them several times a week. And then for those listening, again, their brand new book is called The Good Morning Journal. And if you are looking, I have a lot of clients who I recommend journaling to. I recommend it to everyone, and they say, I don't know what to write. I don't know where to start. I'm not a writer. This is such a good way to get started on journaling because it gives you the great questions and great prompts. And it takes 2 seconds with a pen or a pencil to just answer one question a day. And it's just a great morning practice. I'd love to do this right after my morning meditation. And so I encourage all my listeners to do the same. So that's called The Good Morning Journal by Marc and Angel Chernoff. So Marc and Angel, it was great to see you again. I missed you not being in class with you. And I hope to see you guys again soon. And I hope I get out to San Diego in February of 2024 for your conference.
Yes, we would love that. Yeah. Thank you this has been an enjoyable conversation. Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, it's been great to be here.
Have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jackie.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Overthinker's Guide to Joy. If you're enjoying these episodes, please subscribe or follow this podcast so you can always be in the know when the next episode drops. If you would like to learn more about working with me as a coach, you can connect with me through my website at jackiedegrenis.com. That's JACKIEDECRINIS.com.